Welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, Steven. Today's episode is about how technicians use this tool called a pad lifter and what they do and don't do wrong with these things. So what we have here today is an example of a brass sheet here in place of a nickel sheet or something, which is going to represent a pad cup. Of course, it's not a cup. We have a pad. And we have some shellac here. What I'm going to do is, which many technicians don't do, is I'm going to take some of this shellac, actually, put it in a cup, and I'm going to pound it and break it down into small pieces and pulverize some of it. Many technicians don't do this, but we'll figure out why I do this. Also, you'll need some form of flame in this case. I have a propane tank off camera, and I brought a small, hook up my connection to it, small flame gun. So I'll be using this. And we'll go right to it. Okay, what we see here is we have a pad, the sheet of metal representing a pad cup. We have a flame to the right. We have a shellac stick. And we have some pulverized shellac here, which is used just by using a dowel. This is an old medical pill container. Put some shellac in there, use the dowel and a hammer, and just kind of hammered it down to make smaller pieces. You don't have to pulverize it where it's a powder, just smaller pieces will do. And the importance for this is sometimes you adjust the pad, you'll lift it up sometimes so it'll go flush with the tone hole. When you do that, you're also lifting up the adhesive, but the adhesive is a fixed amount. Now it has to contain or fill in more space, and it does that by lifting up in columns or strings, and those strings harden. The trouble is you don't want that. Now we're going to heat the pad cup some more and the shellac. Going to heat the pad cup a bit more, some more. Now, normally, technicians will also put adhesive on the back of the pad. But what I've normally found is if you put enough adhesive in the pad cup, and then as everything is still hot, you just rotate the pad, it will tend to really stick to the bottom of the pad cup. Otherwise, you get these stringy things all the time, which is what we're trying to avoid, actually, these stringy things. So we have a mount here. We're going to install a pad to the pad cup. So I'll put it in here and I'll rotate a bit. It's in there really good. And normally when you're trying to hook it up to the pad, you end up having a gap someplace. And what technicians will do, they will lift this up to create the angle that they need so it touches the tone hole properly. But when you do that, you create a gap, and many times if you do it too much, this happens. See those stringy things? That's what happens. So usually what I do is if I have to lift the pad up, is I will also throw in some chunks of shellac. Into the pad cup. And when it's nice and hot with the pad cup, those will just simply melt. Then when you float it a little bit more, it'll float the way you want it to. It'll end up being flat. It'll end up being flat with a tone hole. Now I've created a pad that will be uneven in the pad cup, but it'll be even with the tone hole. So one side is higher than the other, and there's proper support for the side that's lifted. By when I lift it up, I fill it with bits of shellac so that melts in, and it works just fine. So remember, if you have to lift the pad during installation, that you want to backfill it with shellac or glue or whatever you're currently using. Because if you don't, you'll get stringy stuff and little support beams underneath the pad. And you may, or the player may, as they play, start getting what's called crunchy pads. That's when the pad gets pushed down by the tone hole and it starts crunching up these little support beams. That's the shellac or the glue or something. And of course, it'll go out of regulation. The horn becomes harder to play, so they push their fingers harder and they crunch more shellac underneath it. This is what you have to avoid when you adjust pads. So you have to use the correct amount of adhesive under the pad to float it properly to the tone hole. Just remember that as we move forward, or if you're a current technician and you have issues like this, or if you're a player and you have crunchy pads, this is what's happening. And as I mentioned at the beginning, is that's why I take some shellac and I'll break it down, pulverize it to smaller pieces so I can backfill a pad if I didn't put enough shellac in the pad, and then adjust it so it's flat with the tone hole. So for players and techs, make sure you do not feel or do the situation. The instrument will go out of adjustment normally fairly quickly. But I want to thank you for listening today. Any questions or comments, please post them down below. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. You gotta love the knowledge, you gotta love life, and you gotta love saxophone and clarinet pads. We'll see you next time.